Fred Haise was born in Biloxi, Mississippi in 1933, which is actually the year my mother was born. He entered the Naval Aviation Cadet Program in 1952. He then served as a U.S. Marine Corps fighter pilot on the F-2H-4 Banshee and F-9F-8 Cougar aircraft, and he's accumulated 9,300 hours of flying time over his career. After his military service, he received a Bachelor of Science in Aeronautical Engineering from the University of Oklahoma and concurrently served in Oklahoma Air National Guard. He then joined NASA and in 1966 was one of 19 astronauts selected for the NASA Astronaut Group 5. He served as backup Lunar Module Pilot for Apollo 8 and Apollo 11 and was then selected to be Lunar Module Pilot on Apollo 13. Apollo 13 was the 7th crewed mission in the Apollo program and would have been the 3rd moon landing. However, the mission was aborted when an explosion in the service module disabled its electrical and life support systems. The crew was supported by the backup systems on the Apollo lunar module, and after looping around the moon, returned back to Earth. This near disaster completely captivated the public for several days, and you can see here the damage, which was extensive, that was done to the service module. The success of the return was due to the skills of many brilliant engineers under the leadership of lead flight director Gene Kranz. Following Apollo 13, Fred was then backup commander for Apollo 16 and was slated to command Apollo 19. However, the program was canceled due to budget cuts. Although Fred is most associated with Apollo 13, he had a long and illustrious career after Apollo. In 1977, he participated in the Space Shuttle approach and landing tests, in which he command piloted the Space Shuttle Enterprise in free flight to 3 landings after being released from the shuttle carrier aircraft. In 1979, Fred left NASA to become a test pilot and executive with Grumman, where he remained until his retirement in 1996. In his retirement, Fred has remained very active with philanthropy, education, and advocacy. My husband and I have met Fred several times when he appeared at the Cradle of Aviation Museum on Long Island. And in case you'd like further information, I highly recommend his book, Never Panic Early, and the Apollo 13 movie, which I would have to say most of the club members have probably seen it 10 times already. But if you haven't, I would definitely recommend it. So now I'd like to welcome Fred Haise, and we're going to call on the members who submitted questions.
All right. Hello, everybody. Can the audience hear me out there? I don't know if everybody probably can't answer at one time, but hopefully you have we have communication. Just one other thing I'd add. Logan Jernan, a software wizard, has created a website that those of you may be interested in. It's www.fredhaise.space. Space is a new domain created about 4 or 5 years ago versus .org or .com. So it's fredhaise.space, and it'll give you, similar to the book, sort of a trail across my career and life with in each section, doesn't match the book, but in each section you'd find narrative to augment the book because the Smithsonian publisher deleted about 50-something pages out of my script for the book. But at any rate, you'd find narrative, you'd find pictures, because a book publisher also limits the number of pictures you can have in the book. And it has archival data, handwritten notes, things like that. Like I have in there almost a daily diary of the year I spent at Grumman as an astronaut, testing the lunar modules, coming through the process after manufacturing to get them installed with systems and check them out, getting them ready to ship to Kennedy to go fly. And I spent a year and almost had like a daily handwritten diary during that time, for instance. But lots of other handwritten sort of things. I'm now having to work with a school teacher to help me convert that to PDFs because some schools now are not teaching cursive writing in schools. And so young children growing up at some time that are interested in space would not be able to read my handwriting. So they can then key on the PDF to be able to read that kind of stuff. Anyway, I guess we can open it up for questions you may have.
Yeah, our first question is going to be from Vincent and Gabriel.
Inspired you to become an
Nice.
astronaut?
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, who is this? Is this Vincent?
No, it's me, Gabriel.
Gabriel.
Okay.
What
Wait.
what inspired you to become an astronaut?
Okay. What inspired me to become an astronaut? Well, not quite true from the introduction. I actually joined NASA in 1959 as a test pilot. And I was a test pilot for 7.5 years at Lewis Research Center in Cleveland, Ohio, and then at Edwards Air Force Base, their Flight Research Center. In fact, I was about 3 years behind Neil Armstrong, who ended up being the first person to walk on the moon. Neil was also a NASA test pilot. And so I just followed Neil's trail about 3 years behind him. And I was really more interested in that business of testing aircraft, modifications to aircraft, more aimed at performance or aimed at safety for aircraft. And I really had not planned to join the astronaut program until I realized I would not get a chance because I was too junior in the office at our Flight Research Center to ever get to fly the X-15 rocket ship. That was the program that was going on there where it would be dropped from a B-52 and piloted to go up to altitudes over 50 miles often, but sometimes even over 60 miles high. So it was a research program. And I had hoped to get to fly that machine, which was a 100% piloted machine. No computers to help you fly the machine. It was all on your own. And whereas the technology has gotten even more so in space, to where there's not much piloting anymore. But at any rate, when I figured out I wouldn't get to fly the X-15 rocket ship before it was finished its program, that's when I decided to apply to become an astronaut. And it was primarily to have a chance to go higher and faster. I was not a scientist, so I was interested in the flying part of it. I would be bored on space station today. Space station is for scientists or engineers of a certain sort, or doctors, even medical people, because the space station is a laboratory. It's a scientific laboratory operating in space. And as I said, that piloting has gone away. The Dragon capsule at SpaceX flies people and cargo up and down, and has flown some private flights even, has only one control in the vehicle, one manual control. If things aren't going right on the trajectory and whatever, you use that one control to command an abort. So that's the total piloting required to fly a SpaceX capsule. So that doesn't interest me too much anymore, and that side of it for being a pilot at least. The only ones that are needed today are Artemis. Artemis is a program to go back to the moon. They've flown one flight of the capsule, the Orion capsule, and it's scheduled to go around the moon at a much higher altitude than I went around. I only went around at about 130 miles, a little above the moon. They're going to go much higher next February, I think is the first launch date. It'll be 4 people to go loop around the moon. They do not have a landing craft. So it really won't be till the mission later, beyond that mission next February, that will maybe attempt a landing back on the moon. When I flew, that was 55 years ago. This year was 55 years ago. I flew Apollo 13. So it's
Wow.
been quite a long time ago.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So maybe is Anne ready for Anne has a question.
Mike and Ann, can you hear
All
me?
right. Anne. Yeah, Mike and Anne. So you have to unmute.
Yeah, you're on mute, it looks like. I can
Can
see
you
the little
unmute?
red symbol.
Gotcha.
There you
Oh,
go.
there we go.
Good evening. Thank you, Fred Haise, for your service. And my question is, how did going into space change you in the short term and across your lifetime?
Okay, how is having a space trip affected me short term and long term? Well, short term, it affected me because I developed a urinary tract infection on Apollo 13 about a day and a half before entry. So I got shots in the rear end twice a day for 2 weeks when they figured out which bug it was. That had gotten me. I think that would have been much simpler today. They gotten medicines now, and I'd probably just gone to the doctor and they'd give me a prescription, and I'd taken pills and probably gotten rid of it. But it wasn't quite that good then, so I had to take those shots. Otherwise, that feeling bad for about 2 weeks to get, I'll call it, fully recovered. That was about the only near-term effect I had from Apollo 13. In fact, Deke Slayton, by the end of that, had already assigned me to my next crew assignment. I was already scheduled to back up John Young as the backup commander for Apollo 16. And so I just went right back into crew training again, hopefully getting to fly either 16 if John got sick or broke a leg, but shortly before launch. And of course, it put me in the lineup to if I didn't get to fly 16, put me in the lineup then to command Apollo 19, which at that time was the last scheduled mission of the program. But unfortunately, budget cuts NASA got forced them to cancel both Apollos 18 and 19. So I didn't get a chance to go back to the moon. But long term, I think it's only affected me in terms of the notoriety of that mission, which has become sort of a folktale in a way of people in a survival situation with a team that worked together to get us home. A much larger team than was shown in the movie. You know, they only shown Gene Kranz and the white team, mission control team. For every mission was supported by 4 teams, 4 flight directors. And then behind them, there was a cascade of people. The engineers that knew the vehicles best were those at the plants, at the companies. See, NASA doesn't build anything. The contractors build things. And so North American Aviation is the ones that had the experts on the capsule and the service module. And Grumman had the people that were smart on the lunar module. So there were probably, I'd say there's probably 2,000 people involved across the country that got to work and helping to solve things that had to get done differently to get us home. So that was kind of one big shortcoming in the movie. I complained to Ron Howard, but he just said, well, you only got 2 hours in a movie, so you can only develop so many characters with his,
Right.
And he's right. I don't know about making movies, so.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't know if Dave made it. Dave had emailed me, had a delay, but I could ask his question. He wanted to know what you thought about the movie, like how realistic was the movie?
Okay, let's just talk a little bit. I had a private showing as well as other astronauts, mission controllers, and those are near the Houston area at a private theater, old-timey theater. It even had balconies, that kind of thing in it. And Ron Howard and Tom Hanks showed up, and they made it very clear before the movie started. This was about a couple of weeks before it was going to be publicly released. They made it clear that they had made a movie that was not a documentary. It was a Hollywood movie. So they were kind of explaining why some of the things, I guess, that we took issue with. But for instance, they greatly exaggerated my throw up from space sickness. I spit up, not threw up, but that's all right. Then they had Jack Swigert and I having an argument about throwing the switch that caused the oxygen tank to explode. And had Jim Lovell hugging me at one point. They greatly exaggerated the motion of the vehicles. And the reasoning for that, and I complained to Ron Howard about why they'd done some of that wasn't really true. He explained it by saying, well, NASA had given me lots of information, a mission report, which I reviewed. They gave me all the air-to-ground radio transmissions for the whole mission between the capsule and mission control, Capcom. And he said, after I finished listening to all of that, he said, it struck me, it never seemed to me you ever had a problem because it was all routine, reading up procedures, readings off instrument panel, talking about switches on the panel, that kind of thing. And so he said, I knew the general public would not understand that side of it. So I did that mainly to humanize you. So that was Ron Howard's explanation for adding some of those extra things in the movie. And as I said before, another shortcoming was he couldn't show a lot of the people that played major roles. And other than those shown, there were some shown in the movie, a few. Gene Kranz's team, another fellow, that mission controller that was dealt a lot with the power down, how to make the 2-day lunar module last for 4 days, which it had to do because that's what we had to live off of till we got to entry. And John Aaron was the flight controller's name. But there were many other people that also lost a lot of sleep. Probably some I talked to when I got back. I think they got less sleep on the ground than I got in flight because they were working sometimes on strict schedules to produce answers to come back with those answers on a schedule of day and time that really had them working overnight often. Some people I know bought blow-up bags or couches, folded couches into mission control and they told me they slept there all night. Didn't even go home. So that's the way that things were going on Earth, with a lot of people working. Simulators were being worked 24 hours a day, where the procedure would be figured out. It had to go in the simulator for proofing with other astronauts, our backup crew, which were John Young, Charlie Duke, and Ken Mattingly, as it turned out. It fall into that role. And Al Shepard and Ed Mitchell and Stu Rutzer, who were scheduled to fly the next mission. So they spent many hours in simulators proofing the procedures that had been worked out to pass up to us to transcribe manually. And because there's no teletype, you had to read it up line by line to write down manually in the spacecraft. So that was what was going on those times, and why the movie was a little from both the time constraint and the difficulty of explaining some of the things that went on technically.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Next we have Federico. Is Federico here? Oh, here we go. This is a good one. This is a good.
First, thank you for taking the time to share your experiences with us. And I teach physics in high school, and I know a couple of colleagues in the science department who do not believe that we, the USA, landed on the moon. What do you recommend us science teachers to say to our fellow science educators who do not trust NASA's account?
Okay. No, I've not personally had someone tell me that, but I know this is like the flat earthers that are also out there, that we don't have a round planet we live on. But nevertheless, on one hand, I think it's a compliment, because obviously they think that because they think it's too difficult to do. And particularly with the technology we had in those days, our big computer on the vehicle, the memory capacity was about 1/10 of a megabyte. 1/10 of a megabyte, not gigabyte. And so it was a challenge. And I appreciate that they think it's maybe too big a challenge that no humans could ever do it. On the second hand, the story I tell them is that, well, on the peak of the Apollo program at Apollo 11, we had over 400,000 people working on the program. We had, through the prime contractors, through subcontractors, piece part manufacturers, NASA had a contract in every state of the United States except South Dakota, domestic U.S. Only one state got left out. So I just, I would tell the people, how do you think you could possibly keep that kind of a secret among over 400,000 people that were working day and night, like at Grumman? And I can tell you, in 1967, test operations I was involved with at Grumman during that year, 1967, went 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We only shut down one day, Christmas Day. So how would you have over 400,000 people that pretty much across the program are working that kind of schedule to get there from here to there and do it all for some fake thing they're going to keep a secret to? When Nixon couldn't hardly keep it a secret among his intimate close staff. So anyway, that's what I'd mostly tell them, that that would have been very hard to keep it a secret.
Thank you.
Okay, so I actually have the next question. And it's, did you ever see or experience anything in space that couldn't be explained?
I have not. I have people that have seen things they couldn't explain. That could be UFOs. They got a different name for it now.
UAP, yeah.
Yeah, but at any rate, same thing. I actually hoped someday we would correspond or meet or see an alien for real that we could communicate with or meet to understand their technology, particularly if some people, think aliens have landed and are here on Earth. And what I'd like to get from them is the technology they have that has defied Einstein's theorems that we can only go as fast as the speed of light. And that's kind of a great limitation for us to think about even the nearest star system. If we somehow found there was a life form there that would be worth visiting or meeting, a trip there, if you went at the speed of light speed, would take you over 2 years to get there. And then obviously if take you 2 years to get back. I mean, that's the kind of distances this is an astronomy group, so you know the distances I'm talking about dealing with. So I'd want to figure out what if those aliens had some kind of warp drive that defied Einstein and his theorem of the speed of light being a limitation. But no, I've never seen anything that I would call out of the ordinary in that respect.
Okay. Is Terry Jackson? Is Terry Jackson there? Bob, you want to go next? Maybe you can go next, Bob Kelly.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. My question is, I was just reading, my wife and I, Carol and I were just reading 6 about the experiences of the women shuttle astronauts. And Sally Ride relates how she first realized the immensity and the danger of flying in space when she saw what I think was the 5th test landing of the Enterprise from the shuttle carrier. The one where it bounced several times and kind of made a pitch to the right, if I remember correctly. What was your best experience as a pilot on those missions, and how would you like to have translated that into a real shuttle mission?
Well, I think that the things that are dangers are same for airplanes as well as space, particularly high performance aircraft. I've been in my earlier days 2 Marine fighter squadrons, and then I was a test pilot 7.5 years for NASA, and then in the space program for 13 years. I've been on fire in airplanes 3 times. Once in a crash that I was burned over 65%, spent 3 months in the hospital, half of that grafted, and regained flight status. I did that. That was after Apollo 13 when I was sport flying, actually. and
Yeah,
got
I
to
was
fly
surprised to hear that.
and got to fly the Space Shuttle Enterprise when I got
Yeah.
back on flight status. So danger is inherent, and it was inherent in your car. You're going beyond about 15 miles an hour. From there on, you have a potential for being injured if you impact the wrong thing. So no, speed is part of it, but also the volatiles and the propellants and the cryogenics that are involved, particularly in spacecraft. That, as we've seen on Challenger, where the leak through the O-rings and the solid leaked onto the central tank, which was full of hydrogen and oxygen, caused the big explosion. And so that that is always something you'd have to worry about, as well as even in the engines performance. In the case of the shuttle, it was 3 of them in the back, and if any of the main propellant lines had fractured, the turbopump had come apart, which ran at very high RPM. The shrapnel from it could again break fuel and propellant, oxidize the propellant lines, and again you'd have a big explosion in the orbiter itself. So no, you got your volatiles that are involved in spaceflight that over the years, of course, have been modified to a degree and smart enough now with the proper testing program to make them very reliable, as SpaceX has done. Their Falcon rocket, which seems to launch things about every other day. I forget how many launches, incredible number of launches and reuses of its first stage, 9, 12 times the same first stage. Has got to a point that I'm still not sure it's quite as reliable as the engine in your car, but it's getting there. That's a very reliable system and much more economical, for instance, than Space Shuttle was.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate that.
Okay. Next is George. You're muted. You got to unmute.
I don't see a face yet.
He's coming.
I'm here, but I don't see.
I see George. I hear you.
Okay, we can hear you.
Well, okay, let's settle for that for the moment. Well, Fred, thanks for being here, and it's a pleasure to talk to you. And after hearing all the great things you've done in your career, I'm just curious now, are you still carrying any thoughts of a bucket list with more goals? And could one of them be returning to space like John Glenn did in 1998?
Okay. No, I don't have that as my bucket list. John, I had a mission that was very short and obviously a very historic mission. First American to go in orbit and circle the Earth, and didn't get to look around very much. So that was a nice thing he got to do with shuttle, and a mission that was days long that he could really enjoy the sights more than he did on his one orbital flight before. But no, at 92 years old, and earlier you weren't a part of the discussion. I've developed neuropathy, so I pretty much have to get around with a rollator walker
I
most
did
of the
hear
time to keep my balance and keep from falling. So no, I would be not fit for space flight in that sense. And the training, the hardest part really, if you're a dedicated crewman with a role on the flight, and I think John didn't have a big role on the shuttle flight. So his heavy work of training was less than what you'd call normal for the commander or co-pilot. And so that training is probably harder than going to fly the flight. The hours you have to spend, how many days a week, always in any launch, normally within the last month to 5 weeks, you almost end up with like 7 days a week, fill in all the squares to feel you're really ready to go. And so it's really a much younger person's job than 92 years old I could think of contemplating. I'd like to have done more travel in my lifetime than I did. I had several overseas trips for various sorts, but I really hadn't done it much as a tourist. To just go as an unknown and some rather spectacular places around the Earth that would have nice to visit, like the pyramids, and give an example, in the pyramids in Egypt. So that's kind of a thing maybe I missed in my life, being pretty much very busy, both with my flying space career, but also as a businessman. In the introduction, I was not a test pilot for Grumman. I was a business executive. I ran space programs for Grumman as a vice president for 4 years, and then went off and formed the first subsidiary company Grumman had in service business, bidding government contracts.
Yeah.
And so I did that till we merged with Northrop, and then I inherited their service company. So I ended up running 2 subsidiary companies up till the time I retired in 1996 with the service business.
All right. Thank you, Fred.
You're welcome.
Is Louise there? Louise?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
I guess you can't see me, but you can hear me. All right, that's a start. Start my video. Okay. My question is about space and getting back to space. How can we best support space exploration and science?
Well, obviously, the way, at least from a NASA standpoint, and what they fund, including the contracts they have with SpaceX, and some of the private companies that have built these unmanned landers that have landed on the moon, is through congressional administration, and the general public if you look at general public as a whole, and I'm not sure it has anywhere near the same fervor. And if you had a percent, nowhere near the percent of the general public that are super enthused about space. And of course, of course, that enthusiasm is what feeds from the bottom up congressmen, senators, not the ones that have Kennedy Space Center in the backyard of Johnson, but broadly across the country, their willingness to, with all the other funding problems they're dealing with, to do much more than what's currently have been programmed for NASA at this time, to have a grand new program like.
But there've been cuts. There've been a lot of cuts.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the problem NASA's facing. General public, I'm surprised at large. A lot of people that are not too knowledgeable about the budgeting process in the country somehow think that NASA has an unlimited set of funds that they can just go do what they want to do, and don't have to fight that through every year through the budgeting cycle, as the Defense Department does, and all the agencies. But right now, it's just not I don't think unless Elon Musk can do it on his own and go to Mars, I'm not sure it will get the U.S. government funding to do that so-called Mars mission Elon Musk has in mind.
But about that, shouldn't the government have a control over and a direction over space exploration? I mean, all right.
There are actually quite a few grassroots organizations. I've gone with a few of them down to Congress to meet. You can go and meet with your congressman to try, to push for
right.
as the public.
Yeah, the funding has to go through there's a subcommittee and the House side, and then the major got to get through the Appropriations Committee. And of course, normally on space, would normally get a blessing that way to be approved by the Senate, that normally a president would go along with.
All right, thank you.
So that has to go through that process of getting an alignment of both houses, Congress and Senate House, to go along with a major budget increase to move things along faster and bigger. No, I fought that for 4 years. One of the contracts I had that I ran actually was a system engineering integration contract on Space Station, when it was called Space Station Freedom for 4 years. I went to Washington, moved to Washington actually. And the biggest challenge I had was to keep it alive every year. Senator Proxmire zeroed NASA funding on it 1 year, and another year in the House committee. If one vote had shifted, there would be no space station today.
Oh,
So there was a lot of fighting. I did a lot of breakfasts and luncheons and dinners with staffers and congressmen trying to sway the votes to try to keep it alive during those 4 years. And of
well,
course,
thank you for that.
yeah. And finally, the Russians joined the program. So it was really the Russians that saved the space station
Mhm.
because that was a joint agreement with the State Department. And it would have been embarrassing for the U.S. to back down after that point. So they pretty adequately funded it from there on, so it took off, and obviously changed the name. It wasn't Freedom anymore. Russians didn't like that name, so it became the ISS, International Space Station.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. I think we can go maybe now to Dee Dee has a question.
Good evening. Hi, how are you? So nice to have you here this evening. Thank you.
You're welcome. I
There's been
see you
lots.
got a nice picture behind you.
Thank you. I tried to get it off because everyone looks so
Yeah.
professional, but
Right.
this is what I have, so maybe it's luck, right?
Okay.
There's been a lot of discussion about ISS maintenance issues and small leaks on the Russian side, I believe. Do you feel that funding will be directed towards a new ISS, or repairs, or an entirely new mission that involves the international community?
Okay. No, the only thing I know is that there have been plans that to deorbit the current space station. I forget what year out there that is, but in the interim, there is a private company that has built the first module that is the makeup of building a commercial space station, completely commercial, and to replace the current ISS, which would be mostly supported through private funding, but also some government experiments would still go on board that new space station. Now, how far it goes, right now, as far as I know, they only have one, the first module built. And that, I forget the name of the private company. I think it's in Houston, in fact, that has that as their goal in life, is to build the pieces that would be brought up and put together to have the backup to the current ISS when it goes away. So that's the only thing I know that's planned to the future space station, which would have international contribution.
I see. That's very interesting. Thank you so much. Wasn't aware of that.
Okay.
Thank you.
John, next is John Palladini.
How are you? Can you hear me?
Yes.
John, I can hear you.
Want to turn the video? You put that. All right. It's great. You're the second.
Oh, we lost you.
He just broke off. We lost you, John.
Do you hear me now? Do you hear me?
Yes.
Now I can hear you, John. Okay.
All right. I'm not going to put.
Nope. Just broke off again. Okay, Houston, we have a problem.
Well, I can ask the question while you're trying to fix it. Because John's question was, did you personally see any flashes from the cosmic rays, like the retina?
I didn't just for normal operations, but we had an experiment to do, and we had this thing. We actually turned all the lights out in the spacecraft. There was a period they asked us to do this on the way to the moon, and we put this apparatus on our head that blanked out everything, and you could see just laying there still and concentrating. You could see white flashes in your eyes, which I was told that was the cosmic rays that went through the capsule structure and actually through this thing we had around our head that I guess was recording the flashes at the same time. That penetrated through that to where we could see it in our eyes, in our eyeballs, little white flashes.
That's amazing. Can you hear us now?
Now, obviously, I've never had an eye problem, so I didn't get enough impacts in my eyes to really change anything from my vision. capability.
Yeah. Okay.
Can you hear us now?
Yeah. Okay. So this is Max. Has the next
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right.
Okay, Max.
Hello. Thank you for your presence for here. And I would like to ask, what was it freaky when you found out that the oxygen tank exploded?
What was my feelings?
Was it scary? Was it scary when the oxygen tank exploded?
Okay. Well, not immediately, because when that happened, I actually was not in the capsule. Jim Lovell and I were in the lunar module. We had been doing a TV show, a live TV show with CBS Network. And that's when the explosion happened. Jack Swigert was all alone in the capsule, and he was asked to throw that switch to stir the little egg beater in the oxygen tanks and hydrogen tanks to stir them up, because at 0G, they tend to form in layers in the tank, and they wanted it stirred up to get a good quantity reading. And that's when the explosion happened. Now, when I got back to the capsule, which I did pretty quick, because that was a loud bang through the electric metal hulls of the vehicle, kind of like if you were in a big oil drum and somebody hit on the side with a sledgehammer. That was very loud. And the little 100-pound attitude thrusters were firing, which was unusual. So I floated up as quick as I could to the capsule. And when I looked at the instrument panel and saw that tank 2, the oxygen readings were 0 down at the bottom of the gauges, two different gauges. So I knew it was real and that we had lost that oxygen tank. Now, the other one, tank 1, we had a backup, a second tank, looked okay. So my immediate feeling was just a sick feeling in my stomach of disappointment, because I knew losing even one tank of 2 meant an abort. We were not going to get to land on the moon. So in that instant, I knew we'd lost the landing. In fact, I knew we'd not even go in lunar orbit with only one oxygen tank left. But now, over a little bit of time, Mission Control picked it up sooner than we did. They developed a slow leak in that second tank, tank 1. And over time, of course, it completely depleted. So now it became more serious. Now there's a question in my mind, are we going to make it back? Because without either of those tanks, the fuel cells needed oxygen and hydrogen to operate. Fuel cells provided electric power, our primary electric power. So that's what happened. When we lost both oxygen tanks, the fuel cells died. Actually, 2 died with the explosion, but the third one died. So we only had 3 very small entry batteries left for power that we could not use, because if we got back and into entry, we would need those to get through entry and open the parachutes and all that kind of stuff. So we had just had to shut that capsule, our home normally, completely down, shut it off, completely off. For 4 days, we had it off. While we went to the landing craft, all 3 of us now, normally only supposed to operate with 2 people. So we're going to have to live off that landing craft for 4 days to get home, when it was normally only meant to operate for 2 days. So that was the big challenge we faced, was how to stretch that thing using the batteries it had, 6 batteries it had in the landing craft, to make them last 4 days rather than 2 days. So that was what people did a lot of work on, to try to see what we could turn off and not operate, and try to live within a certain power level. And of course, going down to the power level we went down to, we got very cold and damp, because there wasn't what was called the thermal blankets, or wrappings inside the outer hull of the vehicle to make it like a thermos bottle to retain the heat we had from the very few electronics we had on. We didn't have much on, and our body warmth. With 3 of us, that made it better than 2, but nevertheless, that was all we had for heat. So it got really cold, and not quite freezing in the landing craft, I guess. And then high 30s Fahrenheit, maybe 37, 38. And the capsule, it froze the water tanks completely. In fact, after entry, the capsule Odyssey, when they recovered it on board the aircraft carrier and inspected it, after at heat of entry even, those water tanks were found still frozen on board the aircraft carrier.
Oh.
So it got below freezing in that capsule.
Thank you for answering my question.
Okay.
And now we have another young member, Juliet. There's Juliet.
Um,
Hi there. Hi.
Hi. My question was, what does the pressure feel like during liftoff
Okay.
from Earth?
All right. What's the pressure feel like on liftoff? There's not much pressure because we've got 5 engines running. They generate 1.5 million pounds of thrust or push. Each of those engines, each of the 5. But that whole stack we're up right up on the tippy top of it. You know, it's a very tall stack, spacecraft, three stages and a limb hidden away in a slaw. And then we're in the capsule right up on the top. That whole thing weighs over 6 million pounds. So with 5 engines, you got 7.5 pounds of push, but the whole stack weighs over 1 million pounds. So that it doesn't lift you off very fast. You move away very slowly, and it gradually gains speed though because you're burning tons of liquid oxygen and RP1, which was the fuel for those engines. Every second, you're burning a ton of that stuff, and it's getting lighter as it's going up. So the G's build up to about at the peak is at 4.5 G's. Just as the engines burn out or shut down, actually. And so that 4.5 G's to us, though, we were all military pilots, been fighter squadrons, doing air combat maneuvering practice in fighter airplanes. I've been, pulling 7 G's for 7.5 G's and that kind of exercise. So 4.5 didn't seem that awful a lot. The biggest difference from anything I'd flown before, airplanes, or in this case, this rocket, were different, was the jerking around because the big engines, 4 of them, could move fore and aft and left and right. And when they moved, that's how they steered the rocket to keep it going in the right direction. And particularly when it moved left and right, it gave you a jerking motion left and right, and where you're laying in the couches. And that left to right motion was pretty extreme at times that some people have described as like a railroad car that came off the tracks. And that was nothing I'd ever experienced in an airplane. I'd experienced lots of up and down. And if you've been on an airliner, probably you've felt turbulence in an airplane, but mostly that's up and down. And this rocket, when it swiveled left and right, you got a jerking left and right that was just as hard as the up and down was in the airliner. So plus you got the other 2 when it went fore and aft. So that was kind of the worst part of the ride on the first stage. I say wasn't bad. I mean, it was just not smooth. Second and third stages though were much better. Pretty smooth rides and did not get near to that G level, that pressure, if you will, as you described.
I guess next we'll go to John Markowitz.
Hi, thanks
Hi,
for
John.
coming to speak with us. Hi. My question would be if I had interviewed you back in 1970 and asked you to predict what the space program would be like in 2025, what would your prediction have been?
Well, I obviously with the vista of what we had in mind when I flew that mission and how well Apollo program was, big it was, and how well it was going, I would have said we'd have probably been on Mars by now, obviously, long before now. And but to say the momentum and that particularly the funding levels that NASA had gotten to follow that trail to lead to that were curtailed. In fact, after Apollo, the budget year after Apollo 11, that's when the first cuts came. And NASA was struggling now to what to do with the monies, lesser monies, but also retain enough to get the front end of the next program going. They were still, I think, in study phases in the background that I wasn't involved with on whether they have space station or a space shuttle next. And they were still doing some of the preliminary, what we call phase A studies to make the decision on which program to put the money on. And so that was where they took money out of Apollo to also do the front end investigations they had to do to get the next program getting ready to go and have enough sense from the phase A studies to bring to Congress to fund the next program, which was space shuttle. So that was what was going on in that period. So that the momentum was gone with Apollo after the landing. It had accomplished JFK's goal. It was interesting. I forget doctor's name, a professor who's made a lot of study in his life of space policy. And his one article I read, he wrote, was that John F. Kennedy, really the primary reason he chose the program was what economic advisors had told him. The economy needed a spark, and they told him, they looked at several options, but the Apollo program, for instance, was one that with the generation I'd already mentioned about the monies that would be spread through contracts, primary subcontracts, piece parts, to every state in the United States except South Dakota, would be the right spark for the economy. And that was frankly the major decision factor for JFK. That the Russian technology that was being spouted as we were behind with Sputnik and of course Gagarin's flight, underneath that, I think we really felt we weren't that far behind. But nevertheless, it made a good cover for the public attention to be willing to go along with the funding that was needed to execute Apollo. So, you know, a lot of these things that way, it's not just pure science or not pure NASA's desires for advancement in the sense of exploring the moon or whatever. There's always a political tie to success that has to be worked as well and supported to support the program.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess we have just a few more minutes left. Is Terry ready? Terry?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, let me see if I can put the video on.
Terry. I don't see Terry, but I can hear you, Terry.
Oh,
there
now
you
you
are.
Okay.
Yeah, hi.
Okay, how you doing there, Mr. Haise?
Hi.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for your service. I know you were in the Air Force and the Marines, I believe. Thank you for your service to your country.
Yep.
Okay, I have a question about 3I Atlas. And, you know, there's been a lot of talk about that comet and where it came from and so forth. I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts on it being a comet or a possible UFO?
Well, I'm not smart enough to search through what I've just seen in media. That's all I've seen about it, but it does obviously has shown signs, or maybe with the material coming off, that it shows maybe it has some propulsion capability. In fact, that may say it's something obviously interstellar that's come from somewhere else outside of our solar system, but also having propulsion might be a craft of some kind, spacecraft. Beyond that, I mean, other than what I've seen, you've probably seen also on news, and a few pictures that have been shown, and obviously it says a long, long stream. So, and much fatter volume-wise, it looks much bigger than, say, a normal comet that we've seen. So it is unusual, and I don't know, and I'm hoping they can figure out some way to get much closer pictures of the object. And I don't know if we got anything we can divert fast enough to get closer to get good pictures, or use maybe some of the great telescopes to be reoriented to like Space Telescope to get a better picture of the feature. But no, as I said earlier, somebody asked about if I ever seen anything unusual. If we ever do find out there's an alien craft or an alien someday we can talk to, I'd be interested in getting to talk to them and try to, if I could communicate and understand their technology that's enabled them to have this feature and capability and propulsion to have exceeded the capability that's espoused in Einstein's theorems of the speed of light being a limitation. That we could really go faster than that somehow.
I think we have time maybe for one more question with Lydia.
Good evening, Captain. I have a question. I remember after the explosion, when it became apparent that you had to quickly exit Odyssey to shelter in Aquarius, that there was a malfunction in the hatch between the two that wasn't closing properly. But fortunately, that allowed you to save valuable time in making the transfer. My question was, were there any other unlikely but lucky coincidences?
Okay. No, what you're describing, I think, is right after the explosion. And of course, I was still working because on my side, all the switches and the gauges all dealt with the electrical system. I was in the right couch. I was busy more talking with Mission Control, and Jack and Jim tried to put the hatch back in the command module because they suspected, don't ask me why, but because the lunar module was a much more fragile built vehicle. It had to be much lighter to meet the performance of a landing on the moon. So there were weight improvement programs and super weight improvement programs, SWIPs they were called, to get the LEM lighter all through its whole lifetime design. And so they suspected if there's a leak, it probably was the LEM. And I think that's why they were wrestling with getting the hatch back in place. Now, it turns out and I don't know if it was in their haste to do that, they were unsuccessful and finally just quit and gave up on it because that would have been a waste of time if they'd got it in place. Because very shortly, the second oxygen tank showed up with a slow leak, and we're going to need that hatch open to get to the lunar module.
Right. Were there any other coincidences?
Get it powered up.
Were there any other coincidences?
Home away from home for the next 4 days. Yeah.
Did anything else happen
that all
was
that excitement
like
right after the explosion?
Were there any other coincidences that happened that were lucky that worked in your favor during the trip?
No, there were nothing of that. Call it quick response. Most of the things we did that were different had been thoroughly worked on the ground, made into procedures, checked out in simulators. In the case of the lithium cartridge, had actually been checked out in a vacuum chamber with the Lunar Module environmental system in it, on the ground in the building 7 at Johnson. So they tested a prototype of that lithium cartridge in that chamber, impregnating it deliberately with a high level of carbon dioxide to verify it worked before that procedure of how to build it, fabricate it, was passed to us to do on orbit or in our spacecraft. So most of the things were done that way. So they were very systematic, manually read up procedures, and not too many on the time constraint. The only ones that had a time constraint were we did 2 manual, without the computer, maneuvers to correct our path on the way home. We were getting shallower in our path toward entry. And one we did using for the 3rd time, we were using the landing engine on the lunar module that would have landed us on the moon. And the other one was a shorter burn using 4 of the 100-pound thrusters, attitude thrusters, all pointed in the X direction, one direction, to execute the other burn. Like one was like not quite 19 seconds, 18 point something seconds, and the other one was like 21 point something seconds. So they were very short maneuvers that we had to do, setting up the attitude, looking out the window. Jim Lovell controlled the attitude manually to set us up in a position that I told him when to stop a motion he had in place at the time when I observed the sun through the optical telescope in the lunar module, which had a look up angle of 60 degrees. And when I saw the sun in there, I just told Jim to stop the maneuver. And we froze the attitude at that point. So that's how we set up the attitude each time to do those manual maneuvers. Used a stopwatch to time the burns. We were wearing a Omega watch. Jack Swigert was, and he actually timed those burns for us, when to start and stop the engine for Jim, and when to stop the translation controller for the 4 jets on the other one with a stopwatch timer.
Thank you so much.
So it's gone so quickly, but we're at the hour mark, and I'd like to, just thank you for this awesome evening. It was really wonderful, and from the older people that remember those days, and the younger people who are, inspired to take the torch to the next level. Thanks so much. It's really wonderful.
I just feel very blessed to have enjoyed the career I've had. It's been a lot of excitement along the way, but also I feel a lot of enjoyment and meeting the challenges. And in some cases, for the aircraft testing I did one very lengthy program, 1.5 years, testing 7 general aviation aircraft. These are like Cessna, Pipers, Beech aircraft. The Civil Aeronautics Board had observed in 1964 an increase in the accidents in those type of aircraft and fatalities. So for the first time in a long time, they asked us to review those types of aircrafts, because mostly where I was at Flight Research Center at Edwards, we were in the high speed end, like I said, with the X-15 rocket ship. And so they gave me as the lead pilot for that light airplane program, the slow end of the spectrum. And I did a complete stability and control evaluation and brought in subject pilots with a test card I gave them to evaluate and write me a 1-page at least written report on what they found, good or bad. And out of that was fed into part 38 or 35 FAA document that has to do with the future design of those type aircrafts that I feel maybe contributed to making them safer to fly, mainly from the standpoint of reducing pilot workload, particularly for instrument flight that people did, low time pilots, many of them, and not experienced, they're all experienced that flew those aircraft to be safer. So I feel good about that contribution as well, those kinds of things.
Do you have any questions for us?
No, I said I hope y'all somewhere keep studying and keep the stars and the universe interesting for people to think about it, continuing at least our big telescopes that are to continue to be developed. If we can figure out a better one and that can see even farther and better study this universe that we're a very small part of here within our little bitty solar system, to think about to answer that real question: are we really here all alone? And just statistically, that can't be true. But as yet, we've not found hard evidence of another living creature. Certainly not within our solar system, and nothing beyond. So it would be nice to know that bigger picture of the universe and how we fit into it and how others may fit into it.
I would like to propose that you could be our honorary member. I think we could swing that, right, Jordan?
I think we can definitely
we'll make you an honorary member of the club. So, we have a fantastic newsletter, and We do a lot of meetings online, so we'd love
Right.
to hear from you again.
Well, I'm happy I got to speak to the group today, and continue your interesting work and findings, hopefully encouraging space business, because that's needed. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, on behalf of the whole club, I would like to say thank you very much, Mr. Haise, and thank you to Karen for arranging this for us. This has been a wonderful time. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Have a good day. All
Good
right.
night.
Bye-bye.